Welcome to GAEL Unscripted, where leadership meets learning and real conversations drive real impact. I'm Ben Wiggins, Executive Director of GAEL. Join us as we go beyond the headlines with Georgia's top education leaders. Let's elevate the conversation. Welcome back, GAEL family, to another exciting episode of GAEL Unscripted. We've got our special guest back from Glisi, and we have a special guest joining us as well. So why don't we just take a couple of minutes, everybody, to introduce themselves, just in case they didn't watch parts 1 and 2. Jenny, why don't you start off?
Sure. Hi again. My name is Jenny Welch. I'm Glisi's Chief Strategy and Growth Officer. And for those of you who might not have caught the first couple episodes, Glisi stands for, go back and listen.
Shame.
Yes, go back and listen. And Glisi stands for the Georgia Leadership Institute for School Improvement.
And I'm Leslie Hazelbussey, CEO and Executive Director of Glisi.
And who do we have with us today, Leslie?
Today, we have our friend Jeffrey O'Neill, who is an assistant principal at Marietta City High School. Hey, Jeffrey.
How you doing, guys?
We're so happy you're with us. Thanks so much for making time during this time of year. We know you've got every imaginable responsibility. You've already gotten a lot done today, I know.
High school assistant principal. He's probably looking for something to do. I mean, we are impeding upon his cafeteria duty, which was one of my favorite things as a high school administrator.
Well, he's we got you out of that today, right?
Yes, and I appreciate it. I do.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for joining us. You don't have prom this weekend, do you?
No, sir. Our prom is in May, so
all right.
Everything's all about testing right now.
That's right.
Marietta's always special, different, and better.
All right. Well, Leslie, Jenny, why don't y'all talk to us a little bit about the Retain program in Glisi? And I believe you'll let Jeffrey share with us a little bit from some of his perspective on that. But what is the Retain program? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, Retain stands for Restoring Teacher Aspiration and Innovation.
Say that one more time.
Mm-hmm. Restoring Teacher Aspiration and Innovation, right? And so the idea that what we want to do is create an environment in schools where teachers aspire to continue to learn, to stay, to grow as teachers, and continue to innovate their own instructional practice. But what's interesting about Retain is we don't actually work with teachers. Retain came out of a partnership with Learn for Life, led by Ken Zeff and his team in the Metro Atlanta area. And Learn for Life has a really interesting model where they look at a range of indicators across the sort of pre-K to post-secondary spectrum. And they engage groups to explore kind of what are some root causes that might be barriers to movement on some of those indicators. And so they pulled together a group around 8th grade math. And they that group kind of looked at a whole range of factors that are contributing to student struggles around 8th grade math. And ultimately, they narrowed down one of the most impactful barriers as teacher turnover because of how important in middle school that conceptual framework is to really lay down the sequence of mathematical concepts and thinking, and that disruption really interrupts the student's ability to kind of progress in learning. And so when they then went down the road of, okay, so what are some contributors to teacher attrition? Again, they looked at all kinds of factors, but one of the most impactful, of course, is teacher working conditions, and who has the most direct impact on those teacher working conditions, but leaders. And of course, even in the private sector, a lot of the retention research notes that people don't leave jobs, they leave leaders. And so the Learn for Life reached out to us. Of course, we've been engaged in some study and some work and some development around programming that is aimed at leaders' adaptive skill sets and some of those human-centered skill sets. Glisi has for a long time been very focused on technical work, right? Root cause analysis and data analysis. But when we stepped back from our work and looked at what was explaining the difference between outcomes for districts that had participated for a long time, but weren't seeing significant impacts, but versus those that were, it was those soft skills, it's those human skills that are the difference maker. And so those two tracks ended up intersecting in Retain. So we worked with Learn for Life and 5 Metro Atlanta school districts. Their HR chiefs got together and worked to help us identify a handful of schools to start with. And we worked with middle school teams. Now, again, going back to some of the other episodes, we don't like to work with individuals because I think it's really tough for an individual person, leader, no matter how super heroic, to go into a school and make transformation. But a leader with his or her team around them, they can begin to really impact culture. And that's why in the Retain model, we have leaders and their teams come through and experience this. So Jeffrey is part of the second cohort of Retain leaders that have come through. It's a 2-year experience, and it is comprised of kind of face-to-face gatherings that really are about community building and networking across job alikes and across the districts, as well, of course, some skill building, some shared language development. And then in addition to that, there's a coaching component. There are sort of homework or practical components that really invite participants to try some things out in the context of their school. And then there is an experience we call a learning studio. We're very intentional about not calling it a capstone because this work is ongoing. There's no peak, but there is sort of an opportunity to share your journey and really invite others into their own journeys and inspire others through it. So Jeffrey is in the at the end of the first year of the second cohort, and we just had a learning studio last month, and we have 24 people in this cohort. Each one had just a really inspirational story. But I really thought that that Jeffrey's really resonated significantly with me, and I think others as well. And it did it not so much, again, this learning studio metaphor is designed less to be about, oh, look at Jeffrey. Jeffrey's journey was a 10 out of 10, although of course it was. Everybody's was. But really, to what degree did in Jeffrey reflecting on his growth and sharing his growth with others inspire others to say, hey, how might I embark on a similar kind of journey? And so we're really excited to have Jeffrey here to join us and just share a little bit about what your experience has been. And in particular, maybe if you would, Jeffrey, just start by saying maybe a little bit about what your journey to the assistant principalship has been, and then we'll sort of go from there.
All right. Well, once again, I want to thank you guys for allowing me to come on this podcast. I appreciate the opportunity. In terms of my journey into educational leadership, I came into education as a coach. I went to the University of West Georgia, was about to graduate, and Lamar County High School reached out to me and said, hey, I coach football. So that's how it started. So for the first maybe 8 years or so, it was all out athletics. That's all I ever thought about. Never in a million years would I expect to have landed where I landed. But on the fourth child, it was time to exit athletics. It was time. But when I exited, my trajectory moved really fast. So I'm an English teacher by trade. That's what I taught. But I noticed all these leadership opportunities that began from being a PLC chair, leading district PLs, all these different opportunities. So actually, once I came over to Marietta, I've been in Marietta about 6 years now. There was an opening for an administrative assistant, which was basically our version of a leadership intern. So I applied for it just because at that point I was like, I believe this is something that I could see in my near future. well, not knowing that it was going to be a mid-year promotion. So I applied for it November. I started in December. Um, so as of today, this makes about 3.5 years of leadership for me. Um, but that's kind of how I ended up where I am now. So when our current principal came in, Dr. Crumbs, he took me from an AA to an assistant principal. I've been one here at Marietta here for the last 2 years, and that's kind of how I ended up where I am now.
Awesome.
Well, Jeffrey, I wonder if you'd tell us, I mean, one of the patterns in the episodes we've talked about before is that people don't always raise their hands, or they don't find themselves engaging with Glisi because you you saw something somewhere and said, hey, let's do it. Often it's someone else who is inviting you into it. Curious to hear, how did you find out, and what were some of your initial impressions of your Retain experience?
I was notified through an email that I was a part of the second cohort of Retain. There was like no introduction, no anything, and I just, hey, and it said your first meeting will be August, I think 25th. I think that was the date. So I went to Dr. Crum and said, hey, Doc, I got this email saying that I was a part of this cohort. I see your name's on it. Do you know anything about this? He said, oh, yeah, that's from HR. They want several of us to attend this cohort. Just give it a gander, and we'll see if it's something that may be feasible for for us here at MHS. So that's
The life of
ultimately
an
how
AP.
I know, right?
It's
So
probably
that's
a parent thanking you
That's right.
for all of the work you've done with their children that got in a little trouble. I'm
Right,
sure
that's
that's what it is.
call.
They'll call
That's
back.
Always the parent calls.
at this point, I'm 1,000% sure it's a testing question. But yeah, that's how I was able to encounter Retain. Um, do we want me to go on about my experience in Retain at this point?
And so then how did that evolve?
So number one, as a young educational leader, it was a little inundating at first because you're sitting at tables with, principals, people that work in HR departments, and people all over the state of Georgia. So it was the first time being in a room quite with that composition for me. Like I said, I'm very early in my journey. Now because of where I am, I've been able to do a lot within that journey. So um, the first thing was trying to figure out what Glisi was, what was the program's goals, like what exactly were we set here to accomplish. And once I realized that it was about teacher retention, that was great. Of course, you can't lead if you don't have anybody willing to follow, and those people that have to follow suit are typically going to be your teachers. So that's great. But when we looked at the way in which we were going to retain, which was through, somatic awareness and using our emotional intelligence and being open to the emotions of our staff, that was hard at first. That was a hard thing for me to grasp based on my experience. So as an educator, as a sports guy, as a coach, emotions don't really, they exist, but they don't really play in performance, right? Like these are the goals, these are the set outcomes, these are the things we need, get it done. And so that's what I have always established as my working way in dealing with things. So to begin to open up and recognize others' feelings and how things make them feel in terms of motivating them to get jobs done, that was a hard thing to wrap my head around. And number one, I had to begin to take myself out of the scenario. Like, let me think about what teachers desire, not what Jeff desired as an educator or what Jeff's experience as an educator was. And then when we began to peel back those layers and kind of do certain somatic practices and recognizing the stress levels and emotions I myself was encountering, I began to notice a couple things. Like, so for example, in my seminar talk, I focused on teacher voice, and how the recognition of teacher voice, and allowing teachers to have a voice, and creating spaces for their voices to be heard, would ultimately create a space for teachers to feel where they belong, and ultimately boost retention. But in doing that, and going through the process of creating those spaces here at MHS, but I also realized, that I was not recognizing my own emotions, specifically around the areas of secondary traumatic stress. When you allow people in your space and they are telling you how things are affecting them, some of which is traumatic. I mean, when you walk in and you say, "Hey, I didn't get a contract," or "Hey, this happened, I lost this person and it's affecting how I'm able to teach my classes," you realize that there's a lot of stress that you're dealing with, and how are you dealing with that stress so that you can still be of assistance to those who need you. So Retain has been able to equip me with a set of skills where, number one, I've been able to even recognize it, because in the past I would have just said, "Hey, doesn't matter, I got to figure out a way, has to get done, I'll deal with that stuff later." But through Retain, I've been able to develop a set of skills that I use to, help me cope with the stress of the job. Therefore, I'm able to be present, for those who need me at the job. So it's been a great experience. I've been able to really broaden my capacities, I think, as a leader, um, and really add some valuable skills, when it comes to giving teacher voice, which I think is extremely important. And that was easy for me because, like I said, I was an English educator. So one of the things that I always focused on was student voice. Like, student voice is important. When students feel like they're heard, they're more willing to take risks. They're more willing to be vulnerable. Therefore, I can make or help them learn. Right? If they do that, and it's a weird thing. Teachers are the same. If there's a sense of belonging, if they feel safe, if they can be vulnerable, then we can execute our jobs in ways that we could never have imagined. So this Retain experience this first year has been amazing. I mean, I never would have imagined that, uh, these skills and techniques would be something that I would be using, but the results that I have seen from them show that we have a lot to learn based on our practices in the past. So it's been a great experience.
Leaders, it's the same way. Principals have to do that with teachers, school leaders with teachers, teachers, of course, with students. But I would say district office needs to be doing that with their principals.
Absolutely.
You know,
It's amazing.
and
Humans are humans.
forms of education, or to be doing that with their superintendents.
Absolutely.
So very, very important. So that's, and I don't think enough of our leaders really think about what Jeffrey touched on. Maybe y'all can elaborate on that a little bit. But as a school leader, he's basically running a little town. And with all of the students and their parents and those families, they have a lot of problems and needs. His faculty they're caring for aging parents, they're dealing with cancer themselves. There's just so many things that the leaders do here and take on. And they've got to go back home. They got to be able to serve their staff, but they've also got to go home and be fully present. Talk about what maybe Retain does to help them learn that resilience and how to deal with those things.
Well, I would say, I mean, not going to throw it all back on Jeffrey, but I will say he named two things that we think are really critical pieces. And so much is repaired by simply giving permission to name some of those things. I think one of the things that Jeffrey said, that would have been his previous practice is just sort of,
Yeah.
ignoring it, stuffing it down,
Compartmentalize. It's over,
compartmentalizing.
move on.
So I do think that a huge part of what we do is simply creating a space where we normalize talking about it and we have language for talking about it. So he talked about secondary traumatic stress, right? And so that's just a whole discipline that's been done looking at first responders, first of all, right? There's a lot of people whose professions put them right adjacent to extremely traumatic experiences, and you don't have to have the experience personally for it to make a significant impact on you. That's what we just heard from Jeffrey. But having some language around that that says, oh, I'm not crazy, that affected me, right? And if you know that there's a whole discipline of research that other people experience this too, that in and of itself has a very empowering effect that dispels just some of that weight. The somatic practices that he talked about, those are practices that are really about how do we become effective stewards of our physical plant. I think about how we've got great custodians out there that take wonderful care of our physical facilities, our schools, and we've all experienced when that doesn't happen. What happens when a building starts to get dilapidated? Well, our bodies are the same, right? And our bodies are built with lots and lots of different signals that can tell us when something's going awry. And again, we stuff it down.
Yep.
Right? And until it becomes an illness or a disease. And we can, if we learn some practices to kind of arrest that effect and release it, then it has less of a deleterious effect. It's not to say that we neutralize it, but we do teach some practices. I mean, they're simple things. They're breathing practices. We did a yoga session one time. And so there's lots of different ways to do that, but to normalize it and help the leaders see it not as either self-care or something that you're going to do on the side if you have time, but to really attach it and name it as a peak elite leadership practice, right? So if you are going for elite levels of leadership practice, not only are you going to be a school improvement ninja and a data, wizard, but you are really in charge of your physical body, because that is the pathway to generative thinking as a leader, to vision casting, to opening up the imagination, decision making. And so those kinds of leadership tasks require that you are in that space. You have access to that part of the brain. So those are just some of the things that we teach.
I'll just add on really briefly, and then I'd be curious what Jeffrey would add on as well. But I think I mentioned this on the first episode, come from an athletics background. And what Leslie's saying about integrating some of these skills into your practice, I think is a really important piece, because what we're not saying is Jeffrey's showing up to work while the phone is ringing and while testing is happening and everything else, and he's doing yoga at his desk, right? We're not suggesting that. The job's going to keep jobbing, and there are these moments where you need to be ready to perform, and to perform at a really high level. And so this idea of how can I be more aware, develop and practice some of these skills through retain, and then identify where I can integrate them into my schedule, into my practice, into my habits. That's really what we're aiming for with the folks that we're supporting and serving.
Fantastic.
And I guess I'll jump in because so I can speak specifically as to how I learned these things through retain. One was through my coach. So my coach, his name is A.O. Deli Harrison, and he would check in. So we would check in like every 2 weeks or so, and we would have conversations about these practices, how they're working, how they're not working, and he would suggest some things. So for me, there were a couple of things that were really easy. Number one, I guess I could call it meditation. It's not quite meditation, but silence. Like when you're dealing with the things that we deal with here, whether it's kids dumping, teachers having it, like it gets to a point. Come in the office and I would just shut the door for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, no talking, no screen, nothing. Just, trying some of my breathing practices or just sitting in the silence. And I was just surprised at how much that alleviated stress. And I felt capable now going and making difficult decisions rather than making them in that moment, based on, where I was at that moment. Um, Also, one thing that we developed is to being present in the place where my feet are. That was very, very, very important because, we're pulled here, there, everywhere in this job and at all times. But trying to figure out a way to plant yourself and be present in the rooms and the places in which you are standing. Um, and then there was self-care things that we were able to develop, like at home. Me and my wife have a new rule because of retain. When I come home, hey, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, tell me about your day, what happened at your job, 5 minutes, what happened at your job, and that's it. Because we tend to carry our jobs with us a little longer than we should in times where we probably should not be thinking about the job. And then lastly, I don't know if you remember this one, Leslie. I'm a part of a fraternity. I'm a part of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and I joined my fraternity's step team. And this thing turned into like one of the best self-care practices it could have possibly ever been. Number one, I was trying something I had never thought about doing, but it really allowed me to clock out from the job. So I would say that,
Community,
yeah. So it was
joy, music. Yeah.
it was a great year because I learned some skills because like I said before, the biggest skill was compartmentalizing. Hey, figure it out, get it done, you'll deal with it later. But actually, through these practices, I'm able to get way more done now. Because, like, I'm clear minded. I know how to get the stress of the day off of me. I know how to be present now through some of the practices I felt through routine. So it's been great.
Well, Leslie, Jenny, tell us if there's someone watching and they go, well, I've got some people in my district I would like to go through this program. How do they go about that? How does the nomination or recommendation process, what does that look like?
Sure. Well, right now we are so fortunate to have several philanthropic foundation partners that are supporting this work in the metro area in Atlanta. But as a nonprofit organization, we are and have been having conversations about one of our 3-year goals at Glisi is to really make sure that we're having that educator retention impact on the whole state. And so if folks are interested in some of what we've been talking about here today, they can reach out to either Leslie or I. You can find our contact information on glisi.org, GLISI, or just look us up in Google us. You'll find our email, but we'd be happy to chat about how we can do something similar to what we've been doing with the metro region to support folks all around the state.
Fantastic. Leslie, is there anything you want to add before we sign off?
I think the only thing I'd add is to reinforce something that Jenny had mentioned, I think in episode 2, which is that in addition to what you just heard from Jeffrey, which is, direct immediate impacts on leaders, that, it has a retentive effect. You can hear already that the experience for him is probably going to mitigate some burnout with leaders. So it's going to have a leader retention effect as well. But
Which leads to teacher retention.
Which can lead, it can, if it's the right
Yeah,
leader.
that's right, that's right.
But what we did find in looking at the attrition rates year over year over year, and this is the 3rd year, so we had a first cohort and looked at both years that they were in, and then this cohort, the data just came in, and each year there was a 50% reduction. So 50% from the first year to the second, another 50% from the second year. And then with this cohort, even though they had rather low attrition coming in, we cut it by 50% again. So it is having an impact on teachers. And it's a little bit of a difference. It's not chocolate fountains and jeans days, but I do think it's a longer term sustainable practice that can help leaders and teachers and students, we hope.
Yeah, well, I think a general summary of all 3 episodes with Glisi, I think it's, and it's true for all school districts, if teacher retention or leader retention or student academic success is truly important, you've got to invest in your people. That's just the bottom line, and you've got to invest the resources, you got to invest the time, And you've got to show your people that you're sincere about caring about them if you are truly serious about retention.
Right. And about student learning,
Yeah.
because that's the other thing is there's that patient piece. If you're expecting the student achievement to happen tomorrow, then people can make that happen.
Yep.
We have erasers, but if you really want to see meaningful learning shift, we've got to have a little bit more patience and look downstream.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry that we interrupted your lunch duty today, but I'm confident that you're going to be able to make it back.
Dr. Crumbs will probably give you another.
There you go.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I'm
Jeffrey.
pretty sure
It's
I'll
good to
find
see you
something.
today.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, Gail family, for joining us for another episode of Gail Unscripted.